But victimhood makes you want to always look at something or the scenario outside of yourself. And that's going to always lead to you repeating the role and the things that you did to be able to make you a victim in the situation in the first place. So that's the first thing. Part of being human is making mistakes. I want us to lean into that more. I want us to embrace that more. I want us to admit that more. For the first time, and I can't remember what situation it was, but I feel like I remember and now I run with it. Oops, that was my bad. That phrase, it was a point in my life where it's like I never wanted to admit that I made a mistake. And it's not necessarily because I want to be perfect, but because of the narrative that I created in my head that like of what it would mean that I made a mistake. I'm a bad person. I intentionally did it. It's like certain things I think in the back of our minds we tell ourselves that a mistake equates to, right? Especially if you walk into a situation with the intention of doing it right or being right or getting it right. That when you make that mistake, we assume that narrative just means we're a horrible person instead of you're just human.
Ask Kadi, the voice of reason. It's an advice show covering all kinds of topics that millennials face. That's my girl, Kadi C, the friend that cares more about your growth than your feelings.
Okay, I love when you record before we are ready. I like to get that. No. Well, welcome to another episode of Ask Kadi, the voice of reason. I am your host, Kadi, and I am so excited to be here with you guys today. I'm so hyped right now because I just got a video. Arlie, my daughter, just learned how to ride a bike officially. And like the commitment she has had, her and her dad had to learning, like to teaching her how to ride a bike. And it's crazy because she's only 6. I learned how to ride a bike at 8. I don't know why I feel like 6 is too soon to be riding a two-wheeler. So I'm like so geeked right now. But before I even get into today's topic, I want to remind you guys to, if you're looking at me right now on YouTube, make sure you subscribe to the YouTube channel and definitely comment after you watch this full episode to just share some of the things that you loved about the episodes or even things that you want me to expound on. If you're listening via audio, make sure you download the podcast on Apple Podcasts and even rate it. That's how we get our podcast, this podcast, to more listeners so we can all grow together and discover the truth about life together. So, you know what? This was not in the plans of what I wanted to discuss, but I was talking to Craig and Greg behind the scenes. Craig and Greg. I always get tongue-tied with your names. But Greg was sharing with us. Okay, correct me when I get it wrong, but I'm going to kind of share the story. So Greg is currently dating. Ooh. And he's a single father. So that is like a whole new realm. Your son is how old? 3. So he recently started dating. He was sharing one of his most recent dating experience with us, where the girl basically clearly has some past trauma where she just dated a guy who had a wife. So Craig, who is completely single but co-parent with his child's Greg. See, the Greg and Craig because Greg with the G, right? We gonna call you G and C. So Craig was like, oh, don't put me in this. Don't mess my marriage up. Like, no, Greg, okay? He's single, but he co-parents with his son's mom or whatever. And basically you was always talking to the girl in the car. Long story short, something happened where she's just like, you got too many red flags. And she's in a space of, I'm not trying to make that same mistake I made before, essentially, where I was dating this man, homie had a whole wife. So now every red flag that she assumes Greg is presenting, she just didn't even try to clear up or get the truth from him. She just straight up, I'm cutting you off and I'm flaking you. That's basically what happened, right? And I think this story is, first of all, so common. As much as because I know you, her perspective seems so wild. But I kept laughing while you was telling the story because I was in my head like, oh my God, there was a time that was so me. Like me being avoidant, and I feel like I touched on this before. If y'all don't know attachment styles, there's the avoidant attachment style and there's the anxious attachment style. Those are the two main ones. There's some subtitles under it, but essentially anxious is people who are afraid of intimate relationships because of that fear of being hurt or having this belief based on the environment you grew up in that your feelings doesn't matter. So you go into situations, into relationships, basically in a space where you're avoiding the possibility of getting hurt, right? And everything that you said she was just gave me, because I would see something and I'm not giving it an opportunity to even know. I tell myself it's that because with the opposite of being anxious, anxious is like you always want to stay close to people, afraid of losing people. So you're always going out your way to try to sustain relationships almost at your own detriment. Like, you know what I'm saying? And the thing is, for you to be able to operate in either side of these, you have to have a narrative you already believe in your head. And you don't want to give any opportunity, a chance to anything to debunk the narrative you have in your head. Why? Because the narrative you have in your head, you created to protect yourself, right? So it's like saying, I feel like I walked into the studio and I feel like one of them got a gun to kill me. Why would I want to be convinced that I don't have a gun? If I already prepared in my mind, I'm gonna come here with a bulletproof vest. I'm gonna make sure I keep my all my body is prepared to react to this potential situation in my head. So the last thing you're thinking to do is to look for opportunities to debunk it, because it's like, I'm gonna get killed. You know what I'm saying? I'm not trying to worry about that. So I thought it was so interesting that because of her past situation, even like Greg was saying, like every time I FaceTime Greg, he's in his car. He spends a lot of time in his car, naturally. But in her mind, she saw that like every time homie calling me, first of all, he got a baby mama. And we already know women, when we hear baby mama, we hear child, they probably still hooking up, stress, a bunch of drama or whatever. That naturally just comes along with that, like that narrative. You know what I'm saying? This is why I praise you so much for even intentionally dating, because I know for a lot of people, when it comes to having a kid, especially when you don't come with that drama, you know what the negative stereotype is to it, that you just don't even want to like date. Like, you know what I'm saying? I don't got time to explain myself to nobody. I ain't got time to be convincing myself. So shout out to you for even trying it. But this is what led you into this situation. And it's kind of what I wanted to touch on. The topic that came to mind when I was thinking about this was make me human again. Breaking the ice of perfection. And I think a lot of what leads to us subconsciously wanting to come off perfect or wanting a situation to be perfect before we fully dive into it is our urge to run from natural things that make us human. And I have a list of things that makes us human that I feel like we naturally run from. And this is what leads to us wanting things to be perfect and being easily let down, because nothing on earth is perfect. So I'm going to start with making mistakes. And I know my hat here says repeat outfits, not mistakes, right? We never want to repeat a mistake, but the gag is we make mistakes because we never acknowledge that it was a mistake in the first place. And this is how we end up in a cycle. But I think the fear of acknowledging something to be a mistake is really stems from the fact that we wanted it to be perfect. And then what happens is when things don't turn out perfect, we lean on victimhood. Now let me get into that, because a lot of us, if not all of us, are guilty of this. When a relationship don't work out, what they did to me. When a job doesn't work out, how they screwed me. That idea of being a victim is such a safe thing to lean on, but it's also so dangerous. It's safe in a moment, but it ends up being dangerous for you long term, because you don't acknowledge the mistake. You don't acknowledge your part, which we all play a part in a role. I always use that idea because I used to work in the city, and anybody who ever worked in the city, Times Square, you know, it's rush hour time. I'm sure you've been bumped at least once or twice in your commute to work, right? And the idea I used to always use is like, if I'm walking down the street and someone bumps into me, right? Now, if you get bumped on a regular road, that's not New York, words are going to be exchanged. It's obvious to stop. Yo, what's going? Because there's always space and opportunity on a natural street. But we talking about Times Square streets where everybody is sausages, where there's tourists 24 hours, 12 months out of the year. Like, everyone is squished up. So it is wasted time to get bumped while walking down the street in Times Square and think you want to wait for someone to apologize. Or even turn around and think you're going to see the person that even bumped into you, because they're going to bump into you and already be 20 miles down the street, right? So I always use this like narrative when it comes to being a victim. I'd rather stop and reflect, hey, what was I doing that caused me to get bumped into and not notice that I was about to be bumped? Was I walking and in my phone? Was I in La La Land? Did I have headphones on? And being able to reflect on that part of it, what role that I played, is what makes me be able to avoid it again. And this is how we don't repeat mistakes. So we have to start getting more comfortable with the idea of making a mistake, right? In the case with you and the girl, right, which as a woman, I completely understand when you go through something so traumatic or something so heartbreaking, like I was in love with somebody and then turns out they had a wife. Your first idea is, I don't want to experience this again. But you not experiencing it again, I feel like what she's doing is trying to look at you or similarities. Like, you know what I'm saying? She don't need to be looking at the similarities that you have with this past partner. She needs to be looking at the similarities that she may have had with herself, but she don't even know she repeated a mistake. I don't know too much about what her situation was with the last situation, but I'm gonna tell you this, because I've had friends and people who've been in this situation. If you date somebody and you wake up one day and you find out they was cheating on you, or they were married, they were living a double life, it's because you didn't ask questions. And the fact that she saw you sitting in the car and automatically assume, oh, this man probably still in love with his ex, or probably lived with his ex, or she probably at the house. That's why he's always in the car when I FaceTime her. When I FaceTime him, she should have just asked you, why are you always in the car? Like, you know what I'm saying? Where you could have explained, which he has a valid reason why he's in the car. Because I know ladies sitting here like, that's kind of wild. Why every time I call? But it's like, because you smoke, like you said, and you don't want to smoke in the house with your parents and stuff like that. So she repeated that mistake. But victimhood makes you want to always look at something or the scenario outside of yourself. And that's going to always lead to you repeating the role and the things that you did to be able to make you a victim in the situation in the first place. So that's the first thing. Part of being human is making mistakes. I want us to lean into that more. I want us to embrace that more. I want us to admit that more. For the first time, and I can't remember what situation it was, but I feel like I remember and now I run with it. Oops, that was my bad. That phrase, or oops, I made a mistake and I thought, oh, how freeing is that phrase? It was a point in my life where it's like, I never wanted to admit that I made a mistake. And it's not necessarily because I want to be perfect, but because of the narrative that I created in my head that, like, of what it would mean that I made a mistake. I'm a bad person. I intentionally did it. It's like certain things I think in the back of our minds, we tell ourselves that a mistake equates to, right? Especially if you walk into a situation with the intention of doing it right or being right or getting it right. That when you make that mistake, we assume that narrative just means we're a horrible person instead of you're just human, you know? So I want us to lean into that more. I don't think y'all understand how making mistakes is the fastest way to get into your dream life, into your dream person. And when we talk about dating, that's the goal. The goal of dating is to see if this person is my person or not, right? So if you think a thought, or if you're this, lean into it to see, like, to open up opportunities to make mistakes. One thing I love as an avoidant, I'll say, I love me a breakup. I love me assuming that this person's gonna do me right and seeing the opportunity, seeing the situation play out that they did me wrong. Versus, I always tell my friends this, I don't believe in cold turkey. As cool as it is, I don't believe in you dating somebody and they not right for you, just cut them off. Because even if you cut that person off and don't go back to that particular person, you're going to go back to that particular situation again. You're going to repeat the mistake if that person is a mistake. So it's like, I'm big on, oh, girl, you ain't over him as long as he ain't abusing you and your life is not in danger. Go back. Go back. Like, go. If it's not out your system, go back. Because what it is not about you allowing yourself to be used or allowing, it's like the lesson that you need to learn to move forward into the higher you that you're trying to be or into the end goal is at risk. So you need to figure out what it is that you're doing or not doing, or what you need to figure out to fully get it out the system and fully learn what it is you have to learn about yourself. And not to say that every moment, every relationship, or every situation is a lesson, but life, we all have like these goals or these people or the things that we want out of life. You really don't know until you get it. So sometimes you have to go into these situations to realize the aspects of you that really desire this thing, and then seeing the reality of, did I really want this or not? You know what I'm saying? So leaning in on those mistakes is going to get you to the thing that you're trying to get to, even if it's not with that specific person, with that specific job, with that specific situation. The mistake is going to get you a step closer because you're going to know what you don't want. We all sound good when we sit there and create our list of things that we don't want in a partner, but I'm telling you, it hit different when you actually experienced it and then went through it and realized, I've been there, done that, not doing that again. Versus, I don't like that, but I never been there. So you're going to continue to dabble in it until you get the full experience that gives you the reality at the end of, that's why I don't want that. Like, you know what I'm saying? The second thing is being disappointed. As an avoidant, a person with an avoidant attachment style, that is so me. I have a fear of being disappointed. But you know what that does? It makes me not set expectations. And I know there's always this common quote, common memes that go around like, don't expect nothing. It prevents being disappointed. No, expect things. Expect things so you can get disappointed. This is not just to vilify the person or like to set expectations so it could not be met. It's to really like, it's the best way to really see the truth of the situation that you're in now, to be present, right? It's like, if you don't go into the world with some kind of a map, some kind of a idea, you're going to end up settling for anything, right? That's what I hear when people say don't have expectations. You know what I'm saying? Don't have expectations. Yeah, when you don't have expectations, there's a chance you end up getting greater than what you expected. Everything ends up being greater. But it also makes you end up, you almost become like Play-Doh, and like people can mold you to whatever they want. You end up being in other people's world and not having people in your world, if that makes sense. And when I say your world, I mean like the things that, your values, the things that you are made up of, the things that create your character. You know what I'm saying? So a lot of our expectations, that's what it's, our expectations stem from our values. Our expectations stem from the end goals that we are working towards in our life. So if you don't set them, especially in things like dating, you know what I'm saying? You really end up in situations like that you shouldn't end up in. Like, you know what I'm saying? I feel like when it comes to setting expectations, not having expectation works for things like, that's like, oh, I just happen to go to somebody's house and they're cooking. I'm not going to expect what they want. Like, I'm going to be open to whatever they're cooking. Those are moments, I think it's a humbling thing. Like, not having expectations is cool for moments that you need to be humble in, right? If I'm at somebody's house, they invited me here. Who am I to have an expectation on what they should cook? That's a moment where I need to be humble. And moments of dating and things about your future and things about your character and things about, when it comes to things that you value, you shouldn't be humble about those things. And to avoid being humble, to avoid being a person that's just there accepting the scrapes, you got to have expectations and you got to allow the moment for you to be disappointed. You know what I'm saying? It's nothing more safe. As in the beginning, I started off talking about the attachment styles. The idea of these attachment styles that we develop as children stems from us needing to feel safe. But there is nothing more safe. There's nothing that makes you feel more safe than being presented an opportunity or being presented something that goes against what you desire and standing up for yourself in the midst of it and saying, nah. Like having an expectation and someone not meeting it and being like, oh no, you don't meet my expectations. And then making the decision to go left. Or then stepping away from the opportunity. It's nothing more empowering and safe, because the idea, as children, we lean on the external world to make us safe. We lean on our mom, we lean on our dad, we lean on things. But in growing into adulthood, the biggest thing is that you got to be your own savior. You got to be your own safe space. And you're not going to be able to be that if you're not presented opportunities where you're hurt, disappointed, and or led astray, and you were not the person to be able to be like, nah, and save yourself from it or protect yourself from it. So leaning into opportunities or leaning into the idea of being disappointed, we shouldn't be afraid of. It is a part of the human experience. It's necessary for the human experience. Next, our emotions. And when I say our emotions, specific emotions like shame, sadness, fear. Oh my God, I feel like the lengths that we go sometimes, and when I say we, I'm talking about myself, particularly, that we go to not feel those emotions, insane. Insane, because those are the emotions. Like, we lean on happiness, granted, everybody wants to be happy. We lean on anger because we feel like anger is the true protection. Like, but really, shame. Being able to admit when you are embarrassed, the empowerment in that. Not just empowering to admit it, because it's like, if you can admit that you're ashamed, then the weapon of someone else trying to embarrass you, or like, you know what I'm saying? Like, I feel like it really, being able to admit to yourself when you're ashamed and also admit to others that you're ashamed allows you to really end up in the places and with the people that belong in your world. And I feel like when we are often hiding our shame, is usually we do it the most in places that is a part of our community. We're hiding things from our family. We're hiding the shame that we have for our partners. And it's like these are the people that God placed in your life to be your armor. Why are you hiding those parts from you? You know what I'm saying? Same thing with fear. Like, I think with the situation with you, Greg, with this girl, the reality is she's afraid to experience what she experienced again. And I think it would have been so, not just dope, but like, it would have freed her so much to tell you that. Because it would have, being able to admit, especially in the dating where I'm just afraid to get hurt. And seeing how someone responds to that is a key factor in knowing, is this my person or not? We be focused on the wrong shit. I always want to know how much somebody make. You want to know, can they pay my rent, or what they look like? The biggest part is knowing if someone is naturally able to be your protector. But how would they know that if they don't see that they have something that they have to protect you from? And if you're not vulnerable to enough to show them when you're afraid? Think about that. The last but certainly not least is confusion. When we are trying to be perfect, we never want to admit when we don't know. When we don't know, when we're lost, when we're confused. And I talked about this in a previous episode. What ends up happening is we end up wanting to isolate because I'm in my season of I don't know. Or because I don't know, I try to rush to an answer. I try to come up with something. And the fastest way to get to the wrong answer is to not lean on confusion. Like, trying to feel like you have to know everything right now. That's the fastest way to get to the wrong answer. You know what I'm saying? So confusion is something that I know I have definitely have allowed myself to be confident in. Like, I just don't know right now. I don't know how I feel. I don't know if I should stay in this relationship. I don't know if I should stay at this job. I don't know what's my next step. I don't know. Oh my God, something so empowering about that, because it opens up doors when you are admitting to yourself that you don't know, and even admitting to others that you don't know. You open up the door for them to give you potential answers. Versus if I tell them, like I corrected you now, when, Greg, when you was talking, you was like, I just feel like this is not my season to date. I'd rather you say, I don't know what dating looks like for me right now. Because if you say, I don't know if this is my season, who knows? I might be walking down the street or end up in a moment where I'm like, oh, this is a nice, wholesome girl that would be great for Greg. But he told me this ain't his season. Just because what just happened to you caused a lot of confusion, for sure, right? You were saying, I was planning on date 2, da-da-da. Now she did this. Reality, you're just confused now. Because what is it? But it's better for you to lean on, I don't know what's next in my dating world. Because then that opens up the door for you to see opportunities that God putting in place to be like, oh wait, maybe is it this? Does God want me to do this? Instead of having a definite answer, which might be the wrong answer. So that's something I want y'all to pay attention to. It's something, those four things are four. There could be more, but those are the four things that I see every day within myself and within people that we run from. And I wanted to use this episode to remind you and remind myself that these are human things to feel. Don't run from that. Stop trying to lean to perfection. Stop trying to lean to feeling like you have to have it all figured out and everything needs to be pretty. That is the scariest thing about this day and age that we're living in with social media, with AI. We are the walking robots now. This perfection that we're leaning towards it's a robotic mentality that really exudes. And what's the number one thing that these robots don't have? That AI don't have emotion. They don't have emotion. They don't have the experiences. They don't have the opportunity to experience new experiences, to come to new thinking. We don't want to be the new walking robots, y'all. We're not trying to compete with AI. We need to be human. That is our superpower, especially in this day and age. And the biggest thing about being human is being vulnerable and being imperfect. Just in case y'all need to be reminded, one, making mistakes. Repeat outfits, not mistakes. You don't repeat mistakes by acknowledging when you made a mistake and sitting in the fact that you made a mistake and not trying to run from it or be a victim. Being disappointed. Set expectations. Allow your feelings to get hurt from time to time. I'm telling you, it does some good. It feels bad, but it does a lot of good. Our emotions. Stop running from the emotions that we deem weak. Shame, fear, sadness is not weakness. It's the gateway to truth. Ooh, I like that. And confusion. When you don't know, I don't know is an answer. Stop trying to run to an answer because that's the fastest way to run to the wrong answer. Now to my favorite part. Ask Kadi the voice of reason. I had someone DM me this question scenario that they wanted me to talk about. Did I screenshot it? Let me see. Didn't screenshot it, but I have it here. So this person said, can you talk about parenting, work, and keeping a social life in your future videos? Now, I get a lot of compliments, especially on social media, because a big part that I like to highlight is my motherhood experience. My daughter is 6 now. I actually had, y'all know I do this thing on Halloween. Me and my daughter for 6 years straight have been doing these viral Halloween costume remakes of just like my favorite TV shows growing up. And people see me travel a lot. Yeah, I see my social life with me hanging with my friends and also being a mom. So I get why I got that question. It's very interesting to me, especially now that I'm a parent, because I've always heard with becoming a parent is like, oh, you ain't gonna have enough time. Everything's gonna be about your kid. Da, da, da. And I learned early on after becoming a mom is that a lot of y'all are just repeating a textbook definition of what was exposed to you about parenthood instead of really allowing the role to replicate your values, right? And I think that's how we get lost in not being able to balance all the aspects of our life. It's not just a matter of time. It's the fact that the idea of being a perfect mom and a perfect dad, the beliefs y'all have about that is just so not the reality of it. You know what I'm saying? So for me, how I have been able to balance it, granted, one for certain is my support system. I have a great support system, not just with her dad, but my village. But me really, one, making sure that my values also is reflected in my parenthood and not me just trying to live an image. And that's one thing I'm so proud of because, child, with social media, I be like, the more and more I see, like, clearly I follow people on social media, but then I connect with them in real life. And the huge distinction between what is going on in people's real lives and what they show on social media, granted, social media is not the place to go and put all your problems. But the gap be too wide for me. And I'll be so proud to be like, oh my God, I'm so glad that what's on my social media is a true reflection on my real life. Like, you know what I'm saying? And you can meet that when you, one, sit with yourself and be true on what your values is and say no to the things that are not that. Like, I traveled a lot before I had my child. I travel a lot now that I have a child. Why? Because it's true to who I am. It's not something I'm doing for the gram. I've always vowed, when I got my first check, and I talked about that on the episode, when I got my first big check, I didn't buy clothes to flex for other people. I didn't buy that. And I'm not saying some people just truly value fashion. I value traveling. And I was like, the thing that when, like, if I spend my money on clothes, the day when I'm broke again, which I would be because I was a college student, when I got my first check, I was like, I'm going to be so disappointed. But if I spend this money on traveling, when I reflect back at that time when I made my first $4,000 in one check, I'm going to be like, at least I used it to travel. You know what I'm saying? So I think a lot of y'all, or when I say y'all, I'm generally speaking, but like a lot of times we get lost in being able to sustain the things, other parts of our life and parenthood is because we're too busy doing the things that isn't a part of our value system, but we think is a reflection of good parenting. You know what I'm saying? Like I'm just gonna leave it at that because I feel like, you know, it for everyone it looks different or it sounds different, but the advice I'm gonna give is really sit with yourself and ask yourself, what is my true value system versus what are the things that I'm doing either to keep up with the Joneses is or to be distracted. And I'm telling you, you will find a gateway to balancing parenthood and that thing that you value, not just by intentionally doing it, but the opportunities will present itself. Ever since I had my kid, and I hate that children get so much slack for this, and I hate this, especially seeing this for people who don't have kids. You hear people say, oh, I don't want to have kids because I like my own, I want my time to myself. I hate that kids get the blame for taking away time or taking it. It's you. It's you. The reality is because you realize how much time you're putting into things that you truly don't value, but you're doing because you're trying to distract yourself or you're trying to keep up with the Joneses. So that's my advice. You will learn to balance your social life, parenthood, and anything else if it is something that you truly value. Thanks again for joining me. Once again, if you're looking at me on YouTube, make sure you are already subscribed to the YouTube channel. And please comment. Let me know how this episode has helped you or things that you want me to expound on. And if you're listening just audio, please go on to Apple Podcasts and make sure you rate this podcast so we can get more listeners and join this community of just trying to better our lives. Bye.
That's my girl, Kadi C, the friend that cares more about your growth than your feelings.